Good evening, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see you here. I can actually not see you because of the lights, but it's great to have you here in the room. My name is LUEBKEMAN, and I have the great privilege of being your host this evening, but also the head of the Strategic Foresight team within the Office of the President of the ETH in Zurich. Tonight, it's Rethinking Humans and Machines. It's a topic which I'm sure many of us have thought about either directly or indirectly. What's our relationship with a machine? What could it be? What will it be? What should it be? In what way will machines and our interaction with machines change our perception of our planet, of ourselves, of creativity? Where will this go? We have a great panel this evening. We are in this splendid museum of natural history here in Berlin. This is my second time here. It's a stunning, stunning exhibition. And also within the Berlin Science Week, which, as most of you, or many of you know, started in 1917. No, it started in 2017. And we're very proud at the ETH to have been here since its inaugural year. This week provides a forum for scientists and science-driven organizations such as ours to engage with the public, share insights into current topics, discuss grand challenges, and envision our future together. Please feel free to tweet, to Instagram, to share your presence here, things you hear that you like, you don't like. Not quite sure if Elon's going to let it get out or not. Who knows? You know, you might have to pay per tweet now. But please use our hashtags. We're always appreciative of that, as is Berlin Science Week. Also, this event is part of ETH Zurich's Rethinking Living campaign. It's something we've been doing for a couple of years, is actually really trying to rethinking living in many different ways, from cities down to molecules. What is life, actually? And we're all feeling massive change across just about every aspect of our lives. Climate change, destruction of biodiversity, the coronavirus pandemic, and technological disruptions which present threats, but more importantly, an opportunity to focus on many of these grand challenges, to embrace deeper meaning, and to rediscover perhaps overlooked aspects of our life. How many of you ever imagined you would become video studio experts? I didn't. Or to appreciate the act of getting in a crowded tram again. How wonderful is that, you know? Rethinking Living convenes scientists, industry experts, and outstanding global thinkers at various events around the world. This is also a part of Zurich Meets Berlin. And I encourage you to visit the exhibition downstairs in the Hall of the Dinosaurs. In particular, our exhibition, Material Shapes the Ages, really quite phenomenal. I never would have imagined in my lifetime we would have steel which could float. And you can see some pieces down there of steel which can float. And Simone, who's our curator, is here in the front row, and she'd be very glad to answer questions, I'm sure, and offer you insights. Taking you tours until midnight tonight. You know, I'm just for those who are online, sorry, but you know, I guess you have to come here next year. But she's with us, and it'd be really welcome you downstairs. Finally, our time together this evening will be around 60 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how the conversation goes. I'm going to first ask our three speakers to come up, one at a time. We're going to have a bit of a dialogue up here, and then I'm going to be asking for you to share questions or comments, preferably questions, and not those questions which are really comments. But you know what I mean by that. You know. Ask some questions. Those online, you're welcome to put those into the chat, and the team here will share them with us, of all of our folks up front. This interface between the human and the machine is a very interesting one, and each one of our guests have engaged this in a very different way. And I'm personally really excited to hear from all three of them. Are you ready? Oh, yeah, thank you. Come on, there you go. There. Yeah. It's the American in the room. What do you say? Yeah. So let's get started. All right. Our first guest was kind of a local, LIAT GRAYVER, who is a Berlin-based cross-disciplinary painter, interdisciplinary painter, and media artist investigating methods to redefine one of the earliest forms of art, painting, within the current technology-based area. As she said when we were talking ahead of time, essentially using art as a platform for research, which I really like. So LIAT, welcome. Come on up. Let's give her a hand. There you go. Thanks. And then we have another somewhat local, grew up here, doesn't quite live in Berlin anymore, but still local. Adinas History, who is a pioneer in VR, AR, a philosopher, and a creative technologist. She's the founder of Earth, and we're going to come back to that in a few minutes, a decentralized environmental data lake that aims to simulate the regeneration solutions for our planet, open sourced and distributed. What I am really looking forward to hearing more about is her focus on indigenous learning and what we can be taking from capturing that knowledge from indigenous peoples. So, Adina, come on up. Welcome. Let's give her a welcome. And last but not least, our homegrown ETH team. No, I'm just kidding. Last but not least, we have Alexander ILIC. He's executive director and co-founder of the ETH AI Center. He's a Swiss-German deep tech entrepreneur, researcher, and investor. He co-founded the computer vision startup Dakuda, which was acquired by augmented reality pioneer Magic Leap in 2017, and is really doing an awful lot with us, helping us to see where AI can help us move into the future across all sorts of different domains. So I'm really looking forward to hearing his views on this. Alec, come on up. All right. So with that, we're going to get started. Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
You're right here. I got you right here. I got the notes here for you. You have this interface between humans and, you said, painting. And this medium, as we were talking earlier, is this medium which is so unpredictable. And how to use a machine to utilize this unpredictability in a way. Where did that come? Where did that come from? Where did that in your life? Where did that germ of the idea come from?
It's a long story, and I will try to make it.
You can make a short one. How about that? All right.
Exactly. But yeah, I'm trained in painting and printmaking, and I was always fascinated by the craftsmanship of the painting. The painting as a process, and less about the idea of the finished image. And working as an artist in our time, I realized I do spend a huge amount of my time in front of computers. I'm looking at pixels in different kind of forms. But those images are not reflecting or representing the complex process that has with interaction of materials that are actually inherent into the craftsmanship and the work that involved in painting. And that kind of brought me into the point of understanding that the digital world cannot give me the tools that I need and I'm interested in. However, the work with computational power and the ability of generating of information, translation of information, transformation of information, saving, variation, etc., was an element that I was really fascinated and interested to continue and explore. And that brought me into the understanding or the wish to work with robotics. And this was kind of joint forces. I've spent some time in the United States, in MIT, working with artists in New York. And slowly in MIT, I actually met Professor Oliver Deussen from the University of Constance, the pioneering project of the E-David painting robot, and I joined forces with them since 2016. And in the work with the group of Professor Deussen, it's computer graphic, so they are dealing actually with pixel representation. I come to the realization of the importance of the definition of what it means to have a single brushstroke. How can we change the goal from deterministic processes of trying to achieve a certain, let's say, image, and actually look into the interaction elements of the decision-making of eye-hand connection and the branching endless possibilities that happen with the interaction with biological, chemical reactions, physical reaction of materials.
So that's almost like 2 nights ago I had the privilege of hosting a conversation with Ed Catmull, the founder of Pixar. And at the end, the product was the image, but yours, the process is the product. Or am I wrong?
I think the word product is something that I'm not very comfortable
Fair,
with.
okay.
Because I think this is as well something that is inherent to how we think in our society today, in the need of creating products to deliver a finished object. And I'm more interested in the matter of thought. And you kind of mentioned before about Adina's practice about the indigenous knowledge. And something that is interesting in indigenous knowledge, in that understanding, is working as groups, is having rituals, is having a different set of minds that bring us to the creation, if it will be artifacts or would it be food or clothes, or that has a very different approach. And this is what I'm more interested in the mindset that art creation in a craft manner, in a temporal element, is more interesting to me than creating product that one can then trade in the market.
Okay, that's fantastic. Now we also have a film, a little video clip.
Yes, of a work that I've done together with the University of Constance 2 years ago, dealing with the definition of what is a brushstrokes. Can a machine recognize a brushstrokes? Can a machine repeat it? And you can have...
Perfect. Great. I find those stunningly beautiful, and I could be really mean and just say, well, it's just a bunch of brush strokes.
Yeah, I have to say that my practice through working with computer informatics and robotics, I moved from making paintings to trying to understand what is a brushstrokes. But that goes into, you know, it has a big philosophical question, but it's as well deeply, like it's the most way, like the most basic way of human communication is making a line, and it has in that the information of a human gesture. And I specifically focused using rice paper and ink, so this is of course strongly references to the calligraphic tradition in the Far East, which I studied but very little, so I'm as well trying to be very respectful to this culture. But I found it like so interesting the level that you have so many hairs in the brush, and everything that you do, it's recording, and you cannot undo it. There is no undo button, you cannot erase it.
No
and
Control Z.
No, but even if to differentiate from oil paints or acrylic painting, let's say, you cannot overpaint it, you cannot erase it. The paper is very thin, and it takes everything in. It's saturated with water, and then the second stroke already will behave very differently than the first one. So that's already different kind of level of changes. And in this exhibition, it started from one brushstrokes that I did, and then the machine was trying to repeat it, but it never managed to. And that created this endless, like it was a 100-meter roll of paper that it was just keep in this loop, exactly.
Trying.
And that brings a lot of question of showing the limitation of computational vision to see how a brushstrokes look like, how one translate image that comes as pixels into a gestural element, embodied element as a stroke itself.
And so was I'm trying to think of the magic within it. I'm thinking the algorithmic magic. So it was learning, because we saw some of the tracing, Was it was learning as it was going, or I'm trying to think of, was there an AI? Was there AI within that as no? Or?
No, not in that project, but right now I'm working inside with my project at the ETH, at the Collegium Helveticum, and part with the Institute of Neuroinformatics on using real-life, like real-time loop, that it actually can see how...
What it's doing.
It's not only to know what it's doing, but it's to learn how materials behave in accordance to that, to learn what kind of a gesture was being made and how to achieve it again. It's something that if I will ask even you to do it, you think a brushstroke is very easy, I can assure you by 100% you will never manage to repeat the same strokes that you did.
Yeah, thank you. You've seen my artwork, so I guess.
I have not seen
yeah,
that,
thank
but,
you. I get that.
I'm just saying that it's like
I won't take
eye-hand
that too
coordination.
personally
It's,
to you. That's okay.
like a lot of people think just a stroke, it's such a simple thing, but there is a lot of knowledge that one needs to take under consideration that happen in our hand tips, behavior of materials.
It's true, because of the humidity of the paper, the moment, how much water, it's so variable. This was really quite incredible with that. It's really cool. So with that, I'm going to move over to Adina. This is a fantastic start. Adina.
Yes.
Humans and machines. You have a history. We all have a history. And you've worked in AR, VR, and there's a sort of a vector which has brought you to where you are now with this massive data lake, which focuses on. So share with us just a short version of
my life
as well. Yeah, just maybe the Cliff Notes version, if you know what that means. Yeah.
Yeah, I got really fascinated with VR AR in around 2013. I think. Oh, my phone. I'm the only one who didn't turn off her phone. Exactly, and I wrote 3 virtual reality film scripts in a time where actually nobody really knew what that was. And I think the entertainment industry was filled with directors who wanted to control the gaze. And so they felt very uncomfortable with a medium in which they had to think of how to actually create something in real time, where you actually don't have control over the viewer on how he behaves in that environment. And I think out of lack of competition in that early stage, I got invited to LA, and I started working with really wonderful people on doing R&D and VR AR. I think what really bothered me very soon is that, of course, you always have a very, I'm a philosopher, so I always have an idealized version of the world. And my first interest was to actually visualize music in VR. And to use musical stems, connect them with a color, and then basically give people like a synesthetic experience and allow them to interact with music. But then the industry went straight to violent games and porn, and it went very far away from what I was envisioning. And then I started becoming really worried about the way how we handle data inside of that environment. Because if people are already worried about Cambridge Analytica and what happened there with voter influencing, what is going to happen in a fully controlled environment that is fully controlled by a company, and in which the environment is so realistic. And I know that everybody who maybe tried VR knows that if you try to walk over an abyss, you're in an office space, but you cannot take that step because your brain is so convinced.
The cortex is pretty darn powerful.
Yeah. So I got really worried about the level of manipulation in those tools, and I turned. That was actually the first time I started thinking about open source tools and about blockchain back then in 2017, 16, trying to understand how can we actually create some kind of self-sovereign identity where people can control their own data, or can actually say, okay, this is the part of data I'm giving to the system, and this one I want to keep private, and to create some kind of co-ownership. And that led me to, over many obstacles. I started actually working with an NGO. I learned a lot about NGO work. And they're the same, it's always like the puppet data, no? It always shows up. It was always the same problem, right? So I started talking to scientists who are doing remote sensing. And we all know that, most satellite data is open and is readily available. You can use computer vision algorithm to detect,
forest
land use or
land use change.
Yeah, exactly. But then what is really relevant is to have in situ data. So they're the same thing. Most in situ data and most relevant on the ground data that gives us insight about irregularities, but also a lot of information that just cannot be observed from space. You know, like you cannot really do a good carbon storage estimation from space, right? You need on the ground data. And there I encountered the same thing. As soon as you basically have industry somehow attached to the groups on the ground, funding the groups on the ground, those data sets were closed again. And so everywhere I went, I realized, okay, there's a relationship between funding and the data that humans and on the ground are producing. And this led me slowly and more to actually, I feel that Earth has been really more a philosophical inquiry for a very long time, because it's been such a long time in the making. But ultimately what we're trying to do is we're actually doing it right now. We're basically creating a data repository in which people are incentivized to publish their AI models on impact evaluation, make them peer-to-peer reviewable, and they're incentivized to also standardize and polish their data sets and to use Web3 tools like decentralized storage to allow people to compute over each data set and to update them. And that would really allow a collaboration where we could generate larger and larger data from what's going on the ground and from satellite data that would give us a much broader spectrum of understanding.
Yeah.
I'll stop right here.
So I think you also have a little film clip which we could take a look at, which is well, way to go jumping the gun there, guys. There you go.
Well, that's good. And actually, it's very slow in the beginning. This is a film we did a year ago. We used Landsat satellite data, and then I spent a lot of time in Brazil. I started honing into indigenous territories because I started, looking at carbon credits, at ESG credits, at all these upcoming incentives that we have in the industry to offset emissions. And I was wondering, the more I was speaking to communities on the ground, it became very clear that often indigenous communities who are sitting on the healthiest land and have protected the land for generations, not really have access to the funds from carbon credits. Instead, 10 white guys in Michigan who own land in Panama and plant eucalyptus trees refinance their land with carbon credits. So I was trying to understand how can we actually create something that's transparent and trustable and allows us to get a good estimate of what is actually going on the ground. Because I think one of the biggest thresholds that we have right now in the ESG and carbon credit conversation is that we actually do not know what impact is. We assume impact, and then we fund it. So what we're trying to do is to retroactively basically first create a model on what could be the best form of regeneration, establish impact evaluators, and then drive funding towards it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, because it seems like there's a lot of folks who are trying to look at that exactly, trying to understand what's the actual carbon sinking, if we just only look at carbon, but it's also biodiversity and the whole geochemical flows, all of the different planetary boundaries, if you will, on a place and mapping them, layering them in, which would be really fantastic so we can see where the delta needs to go.
Exactly.
That's good. Now, how many people are participating in this now? I mean, are feeding into this?
We're a very small team. We're still only 6 people.
Yeah.
We're working on the MVP, minimal viable product.
Yeah.
But
most valuable player?
Most viable. No, not that.
Okay. Yeah.
But because we're a network and because we're blockchain based, we really see that not so much. We don't see ourselves as a company. We're really a network that is incentivizing through a token economy participation, through bounties, and really like large scale peer review. And this is also really important to me because I think that maybe the next innovation comes from like a team of kids in India.
Yeah.
And we need to be more inclusive and actually allowing everybody to have access to those, to this data.
That's great.
Thank
you very much for that.
Welcome.
And that's a perfect segue to Alex. So Alex, access. And tell us a little bit about how you ended up becoming I call it the lightning rod for AI at the ETH with the AI Center and what you're trying to achieve there.
So I spent some time as an entrepreneur building a computer vision startup, right in the transition from using a lot of classical programming, classical math, geometry, and then transitioning more towards learning-based models. What it means that we moved somehow from programming computers with punch cards, lines of codes, and very classical math models to now teaching machines with data what we want to achieve. And I think that's something where I believe as humans we're very, very good at creating tools and using tools also to propel us forward. And for me, AI is one of the tools that is significant in the next 10 years. And I also realized that people are afraid because every new change, people are resistant and try to understand it, which is quite normal. And the speed that has been in this field, because before we had big data, and then suddenly we had the ability to do something with it. We had the compute, we had the algorithm, we had a lot of progress in that part. That seemed to be very, very fast. What I think like many people still have the idea that which I would say is now a little bit outdated, that you're afraid that somehow an AI takes over and replaces us. I think the problem in the next 10, 20 years is not that. I think the next 10, 20 years is how can we use AI, meaning leveraging the data, leveraging this as a tool to be more effective of what we want to accomplish. Discover new drugs, fight climate change, increase biodiversity and things like this, right? So we need to learn how to use this tool and make this accessible to everyone. It has also to do a lot with data and potential access to data and risk. So I think this is an amazing example here. And yeah, one of my functions where I look what does success look like is how can we enable especially more young talents to make a big impact on this. Because I think like career choices, especially in difficult economic times, it's very important that a large proportion of people considers building their own company. Because if you look at the big companies that are today fueled by data, they're now old dinosaurs, to make a reference to downstairs, right? So they are at the risk of going extinct. And I think this is also on the one hand side, very beautiful that there's a cycle and a new opportunity. So we always get chances to start again and bring fresh ideas in. And I think we're in one of these phases. And if bigger companies, have the same problems like everyone else, then we need younger, more fast startups and entrepreneurs coming up. And yeah, so this is a little bit the mission. I believe that still there will be a lot going on in AI foundations. So at ETH, we're a cross-departmental center, so across all the 16 departments from architecture, social sciences, computer science, electric engineering, so the whole span. And in many of them, there are new AI foundations being developed, so which make it more effective that systems can learn from less data and generalize better. And if we're very good at bringing this faster to where it's needed most, the different application areas, then I think we can accelerate progress and really make substantial advances in a number of fields. So this is a little bit positive technology's point of view, but I truly believe that this is something where we are right now at this point. And we can come back maybe to this later. I think like we should be just careful that we're not too skeptical about certain aspects of it, but there are other areas where I feel we should be more skeptical. We can dive more deeply in this.
Oh, I love how you just dangled that out there and say, okay, we can come back to it. Let's do it right now. Let's go ahead. You've got the stage. Keep going.
Yeah, if we want to jump in a little bit, I think like, so what are the things that we should be less skeptical of? I think like it's not the topic that machines make decisions for us, right? So it's still feeding us with opportunities of, this, like it condenses a lot of data. So we are able, it gives us new superpowers. We're able to deal with a lot more data that we couldn't process ourselves. So I think machines are extremely good in doing boring, repetitive, and dangerous tasks, which we want to get rid of, right? And so I would say it actually helps us to amplify more what humans are good at and what makes also fun for us. The thing where I which is a little bit underestimated, is what substantial power shift this requires on many parts where we need to break up many silos. And my concern is that we missed the last maybe 10 years where big database companies were built, and now we take all our concerns and anger out on the young startups that are coming up. So this is something where I would say we should rethink the power structures that are there today, and what can we do to shift it?
I saw both of your heads bobbing up and down on that one. And what were you bobbing your head at when he was saying the power shifts and the data and looking forward?
First of all, I agree on all of these points. I just kind of only stop when you start with a positive element and you said what technology is allowing us. And I wonder when you say it who is we? Who is us? Who is these people that you talk about? Because I think it's excluding, like from our perspective, a lot of people that don't have this access, don't have this knowledge. And this has come with the most economical access just for the machines itself, for the technological platforms itself. And on the other part that you talked about, the anger that we have to the concentration of data that have by the big companies and how it's being targeted into the young startups today, it made me a bit thinking if it's about the systems themselves, or let's say the companies themselves, or would it be more accurate to think and to stop and think about our mindset? And in that case, I will talk about more the capitalist system. And we cannot separate one from the other when you talk about the use of AI as a new opportunity without talking about the capitalist system, that it's kind of thriving. There is a good relationship happening between the two, and how that can be changed, because we are right now, politically wise, in a shifting right. A bit scary, to my opinion. And then the tools of AI in those times is, for me, more of a danger than opportunity. Like, I agree with you about all the great things that it can actually enable us, but it feels to me like it... Yeah, but that's...
Yeah, I would actually divert this over to Adina, because I mean, you did this kind of move right now, where basically you're taking things and making them more open. I think this is a very important tool that we can use. So I don't know, you have probably sat in a lot of situations where before it was very strong structures, which you're now breaking up.
Absolutely. Yes, I think this is exactly, like, AI is a great tool. Let's not underestimate that. It's really a great tool. And humans have always created great tools that help them along. But this is really also what it is. And we need to, A, demystify it. And secondly, of course, as you said, we actually, and especially in Europe, we kind of missed that boat in the last 10 to 15 years, where Silicon Valley companies created this incredible data hoover, collection of data that would allow them to basically move fast with artificial intelligence. And we cannot disconnect AI from the business models. In fact, all digital startups have only one business model, and that's basically we're going to sell our data analysis. From Bloomberg to the youngest startups, there is no other business model. So the problems
until today, yeah.
Yeah, so actually the business models are the problem and not AI. So the way we monetize and we capitalize on something that actually should be shared knowledge, because a good AI algorithm is comprised of so much data from so many people. So if we take that and we pretend that there was no participation and no relationship between those we took the data from and the model, then we really have to rethink the way we do business. And that's actually why I moved to blockchain, because until today I'm actually convinced that there's no way to build what we're building and to have a revenue, which we need, and opening up fully all the data. So the way we chose to do it is through a token economy.
I'm actually quite fascinated. We started off with humans and machines. We've landed on our socioeconomic system.
It all goes back to that.
Well, which shows what some of the drivers are. The drivers for change, and as you've pointed out, at the moment we're in this precarious moment in history, and with the tools which we have at our fingertips, or not, as you also say, if you don't. But I would like to come back to something you said, which I'm not so. If machines making decisions for us, we shouldn't be worried about that. What do you two think about this? Alex he's convinced. What about you? Is this something?
Convinced of what? I missed that. Convinced of machines should.
Did you agree with it? We shouldn't worry about machines making decisions for us. I'm talking about humans and machines.
Got it.
Do you agree?
I have a bit of. Sorry, who's?
Either one of you. I mean,
I think
go ahead.
it's a bit out of context to come and pray Alex that way.
Yeah, thank you. That's true.
But first of all, we'd like to break it down a bit to ask what it means to make decisions. Because making decisions, there's the big one that you're aware of the decision that you're making. And I'm sorry, I'm taking it back into painting, but I am a painter.
I wanted to. That's where I actually wanted to go, is because this machine is deciding what it's going to do.
But there is a lot of decision that happening in a smaller scale. This is what I'm talking about, the mindset of where we're at in a situation. And it's a kind of to differentiate automatized processes into an adaptive one. And I don't believe right now, and I think this is something that right now the AI Center is dealing with a lot with, I don't know if adaptive is the right word, but you have with the idea of having machines being more open to communicate, to collaborate with human, and for that you need a level of adaptation. That means to open up the decision that you can make to a much larger, and in a way as well, unexpected outcomes. And of course, I'm coming from the arts where it's, in a way, a safe environment for playfulness. You can try out stuff, and if something doesn't work out, no harm happened. But I'm always going back into it because there's a really beautiful series of lecture by Ursula Franklin, The Real World of Technology from, I think it's the late 80s or 90s.
Ancient history.
Exactly, ancient history. Yeah. But she created kind of two definitions of technology. One she called prescriptive technology, and the other one she called holistic technology. And I always going back into it because I like how she differentiated the two into one that means following orders. And I will make a jump here into how it's operated in music, for example, that you have orchestra musician, that they need to follow the notation in order to operate. And this is almost like, we say, military structure. But then there is the holistic technology. It means reaction and adaptation to a current situation. And this will be more as...
jazz.
In a way. Improvisation. It doesn't have to be...
Improvisation, yeah.
But it's about the level of being alert to everything that's happening around you and to be able to respond. And in this moment of response, it's not only about, oh, what will sound nice. There is so many elements that we are not even aware that could be about the level of what I ate yesterday and how I feel right now, if I slept good, or I don't know, a dream I had, or my relationship with my mother. It could be a lot of things. But this is the human factor that, for me, is crucial in the decision making. And when we're going into a big data situation to automatization, we removing this element. And I see it more and more in labs that are setting right now to create medication. And the lab situation of playing around with materials and making decisions almost disappeared because we relying so much about the simulation, that prediction that AI will give us. And me as a person who is interested in the craft and the importance of craft, however, to see how that can be integrated in the time of machine is, for me, the interesting part, to use the machine as an extension for the decision-making that we have, but not something to rely on for decision-making.
Carrying on that, wisdom. Humans have wisdom, or some do, or maybe not. But in all seriousness, humans have wisdom which we either earn, or as a collective. Indigenous people have an oral history of observational science, if you will, and wisdom which can be passed. How does this, what's that relationship between wisdom and the machine? I'm thinking these two words, humans and machines, the wisdom that takes with the stroke, or the wisdom of the indigenous peoples, or making judicial decisions from an algorithm. Where's the wisdom? Where's it going to sit? How are we going to hold it? Who wants to go for that one? Alec?
So yeah, you said like one thing that you said, the wisdom in making decisions. Like I think that will stay with people, with humans, for a long time. So that's one of the problems that I would not put for the next 10 or 20 years. And I think what's very important is just the question is like, okay, if now a lot of maybe repetitive tasks before, for instance, in drug discovery, I needed a lot of experiments before I can move forward. Now I can reduce it from this universe of experiments to a smaller set that I can advance faster, right? So this would be another part. So I don't think it replaces the craftsmanship and also the wisdom in part, but it helps us to move faster. And this is kind of like what I see. And one example, I don't know, like how many the audience tried, this text to image generation. So did anyone try that in the audience? Yeah, half of the people. Did anyone of you notice how hard it is when you have a specific goal in mind to achieve it? Anyone? Yeah. So the problem is with this that you realize suddenly now that if you have a model that is trained on a specific data set, it has learned something, it has also learned specific ways of expressing something which might not be your own, right? So there's not a very high level of personalization. So it's sometimes very hard to get exactly what you want. And I think this is something which I would like to see in the next 10 years, that the systems become a lot more attuned to our way of thinking. So they learn with each interaction how we express ourselves, what we want to do to help us in the process, and not the other way around. So this is one of the reasons why I'm not using like voice assistants like Siri, because I feel like I need to learn too much to change the way, like, so for me, it's just like a verbal programming. Right, so there's no intelligence
but I want to ask you
in that
about
part.
it. Like, how do you know what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because when there is a standardization in a global way of certain kind of aesthetic or manner of expression, you will try to achieve, if you're just a teenager, want to put something in social media, you want to have something that looks like what everybody else already done. So this is actually something that automatically reduces the ability of actually self-expression because of the system itself. So this is what I'm saying, like, about the design of the systems itself, what influence what and where.
So I would say it gives us, for instance, a power of recombination of existing things. Yeah, and it speeds up some things, but you cannot achieve a full end-to-end part what you want. It accelerates a few things. I mean, what is an interesting question is then, how do you break with those parts? I think this is a big topic in your work as well. I think it's great, like for instance, if I'm creating now figures for PowerPoint, it's not important that it looks super original. I just want to express a certain part that it matches with what I have maybe on the text. For this purpose, it's fine, right? But if you want to create something truly new, then it's maybe something that you need different tools. You need to enhance it and so on. But I think one way that it increases is that we are able to express ourselves better with images. So I think that will be in the future something that we say when we do brainstorming in the future, we can easier use that because we can also implicitly communicate, for instance, a mood that we wanted to transport, which is very hard if I just, I'm not an artist, so for me it's very hard to draw it. You could maybe draw it, right? But this would give me the power, for instance, to express a concept easier than spending a long time on
but this is less about expression, it's more about matters of communication. This is through imagery. So it's a different way. It's more about codification of a new language that is not based on letters, but is actually based on images. So I think it's a different, but it's about the combination of different images together that goes into this codification.
Yeah. And what I'm saying in this process is like just that today, if you use any of the systems today, they're most of the time built the way that if you use them more often, they don't learn to what you do. It's more the opposite, right? So we need to learn how Siri works, right? And not the other way around. In the same way that, which is coming to the business models, I mean, yes, we get personal recommendations, but the personal is related, is just an economic goal function of what we're most likely to buy. It's not really what I personally want. So I want this ability that we can express what problems do we want solved, and at the interactions, so maximizing the bandwidth from us that you don't need to be a programmer anymore to express yourself towards getting something with a machine. So this would be kind of like a good state to be in the next 10 years.
Go ahead, Adina, and then we're going to...
I would like to contribute to this for a second, though,
Yes.
because I do recognize Liat's point, and I think the problem here is containers, right? We live in a containered society, right? Facebook, Instagram, TikTok has basically created a way for us to be creative within a container that has been set the framework of how we actually express ourselves. And I'm a big fan of people like Lawrence Lassig, who created the Creative Commons license. And I really, again, think the problem here is not in technology, but everything around it. With Earth, I'm a true believer in radical collaboration and collective intelligence. And I really believe that if you give people the tools, they will be so creative with them. But if you underestimate people and you try to create playful containers and plug-and-play systems for them, because you already assume that they're not as smart as the scientists, and therefore you basically already container them in the way that they can express themselves, then you create a brave new world. So really, this is, and sorry, and and I think I'm always surprised actually how many people code Python. Like I'm sitting in some kind of like hostel in Brazil, and there's this guy who's like 18 years old, and he's like, oh, I'm using Python to actually look at CloudForce and the Amazon and how they're changing. And I'm so impressed with every time I speak with like even like 18-year-olds or 12-year-olds who are actually coding. And they say that the next frontier of illiteracy is not knowing how to read a book, but not knowing how to read code. And to me, it really comes down to education. Everybody should send their children to Computer Chaos Club with 5 years old. They should learn to code in order to not be containered by the future AI tools that are basically then controlled by companies who are putting those containers out, limiting expression.
A great plea for education, education. We like that, absolutely. Thank you. Questions? This is a chance for either those online or for you to share a question with us. Here's one in the back. We have microphones. We're going to have probably one or two. No, we need a microphone so those online can hear it too. The microphone's right in front of you. If you turn around. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. I actually have several questions, but
you get one.
Because you just mentioned the creative license thing. Actually, that's my most pressing question, because what about ownership? Like when you use AI, you're not. Actually, it's not your creativity, it's the creativity of all the data that you give to the machine, and especially in arts. And now my other question is kind of connected to this.
All right.
I know, I'm not allowed to ask another question.
Okay, so
but it's a connected
thing. It's a good question. That's a good question.
You.
Let's stay with that one. Let's stay with that one. So
yeah.
What about that? It's a good question. Any of you?
Liat?
Yeah, Liat?
This question always is the first question to come in every panel.
Yeah, well, he follows you. So we're going to take the mic back.
I'm just really fascinated by the fact that we are really obsessed with knowing the ownership, like, to attribute to someone. And I'm kind of going back into this understanding of knowledge of community, of trying to say, what about the fact that it's owned by a community that create a certain work, as a way of thinking about it. And going back as well to the discussion we had here just right now, I think a lot of it is not only about who is the one to get the license or the title or the autogram on it. It's as well the question of control. How much did I control and influence what happened here, and how much was happened to me and I just reacted? So there is a lot that I would put the power in the vision that has a lot to do with the philosophy behind it, the decision making, and the envision of where we're going, if it's in artwork, if it's in creating of new businesses, companies. For me, it's kind of the same.
Other comments? Or you want to make comment or no?
I do agree with you, though, because I think that if we have tools like in the music industry, for example, tools being fed to musicians in which they're collaborating, then the question is very valid. Who ultimately owns the IP right on that collaboration between human and machine, right? And often we don't read the fine print. And I do believe actually that we need new structures for that. We need to understand, like if I use a certain tool, I have also co-created that tool because I've also furthered that tool. So how do I get co-ownership? But this is where I always go back to blockchain and IP on chain. That will be always my answer.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we got one up here. There's two up here. 3, 1, 2, 3. We'll start with the middle, and then we'll go here, and then go here. Yeah. Yes, you with the black shirt, and then we'll go right there. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So for this very interesting panel, and I also had the possibility to hear the other panel on ethical AI at lunchtime. So I think it connects very nicely. So I'm going to start and ask a related question. Namely, we've heard many things about what we can and cannot, should or should not do with AI. But in the end, what you can and cannot do is based on what is the legal framework, right? So what does the regulator allow you to do? And the regulator is always behind because the legislative process takes many, many years. And what we are doing at the moment in Europe is, in the EU, I should say, we are creating the legal framework for the next decade with the Data Governance Act and the AI Act. And so my question would be, from your perspective, is this going in the right direction? Because we need to find the balance between protecting civil rights, privacy, and so on, and also enabling innovation. So it's a question to whoever feels they want to answer.
So we're back to socioeconomic geopolitics.
Yeah, so maybe I can say a few things on this. Yeah. So there, no one knows what's right or wrong. We would only know retrospectively, right? So 10 years in, maybe we can answer if this was good or not. What we're trying, for instance, in Zurich, we're very closely working with the local government, with the canton. We have created a sandbox where basically just all of the companies and startups can come with questions on how do they do things today, what's allowed, how should they do it. Because in general, I made the observation that companies here care quite a lot about data and protecting people. And I think it should not be forgotten that we set the right incentive that the good solutions are getting, a stronger boost. So we take a little bit more of a bottom-up approach, right? So we look at what are cases there, how can we strengthen those that are there, and then maybe the parts that need to be regulated get smaller and smaller, because if people are doing a good job, that are embodying maybe the value system also more strongly that's present in Europe, then the space that we actually need to regulate becomes much smaller than if we say, let's regulate everything, right? So this might be one approach. I don't know which one is better, to take on everything holistically at once or to try this bottom-up. We try it at the moment with the bottom-up way, and we'll see what comes out better.
It's a tough question to answer. Very tough, because we're in a global competitive marketplace, and this is our reality. And it's a very legitimate question, and I don't think we can answer that right now. But it's a good one over a glass of wine. We have another question right here. Right, this gentleman right here in the sweater, right, Nina, right there. Right there, there you go. And then we'll come over to you, and then there's one in the back. Yeah.
So my question is about the brush stroke, for example. I think the machines, the computer, the AI will be, at some point it will be able to make the brush stroke and to paint, because like with more computational power and with more sensorics, and also there's the problem with the sense of time and feelings and intuition, but it could theoretically learn how that goes, and also it could learn about society and could and to reflect on society and things like that. So theoretically, the AI could at some point make better art as human artists. Would that be a problem? It's just that.
Can I say something to that? Because I
Sure, go for it.
This is so funny, because I've heard this comment before, and I always think that humans make art for humans. Like if a machine was to start enjoying its own art, maybe it would compose music on Wi-Fi and we would never know about it, Like the whole point of AI is to actually give us a tool to express ourselves, and there is no good or better. because it is the human that will always feel the satisfaction from art or not. If AI decides to generate its own intelligence, it will do it most likely on a level and frequency that we have zero access to, so it's not even relevant for us.
So maybe if I can add one perspective to that, because what is very nice that you said, like, oh, at some point this will be better than us. And I think this is a narrative that is very sticky with AI, has been at the early beginning, the Turing test, beating people at chess, at Go, and so on. I think this is a point where I would actually start changing the narrative, because it changes how we think. So we should not think of, oh, when is it possible to replace this, what we can do and love, right? Because if this is our thinking, that AI will replace the stuff that we do and love, then we're in trouble. Because it only means like there's fear, and then with fear, you can either run away or you don't move at all, right? And I think what would be more useful is the question, what can we do with AI that we could not do before? Because if you look back in the history, there has always been things that we can do now, thanks to electricity, to computers, and so on. So these are, at the end of the day, the things that matter for history. So we should focus on, writing this chapter of history proactively. And I think this would be nice also to see that reflected in public dialogue and in the press, in the media, and so on. It's a difficult question, but I really like this one. Also good for a glass of wine at some point.
There's a great article by Baudrillard, the philosopher, where he describes how he went into a Japanese elevator and he heard Muzak for the first time, and he felt that he heard Beethoven in 5 dimensions, and it was so perfect, but he didn't feel anything. Because the perfection of it, the generated music, still didn't resonate with him. So maybe
Beautifully stated, well stated. There's another question here, and then there's another in the middle. This gentleman, okay, well, you'll get next.
Hi, thank you so much. I have one question, and it's about bias. I mean, working with neural networks, we discovered that some models have a certain bias, and instead of trying to eliminate it, is there a way to use it in a positive way, as in like a guidance for a positive outcome? Yeah, that's basically the question.
Yeah, so I think one thing which is important, so bias is an important topic, right? Because we know that data doesn't represent the world. Yeah, so this example, maybe you have seen this at some point. If you train a model for what color does the banana have, it says green, right? Because yellow is normal, so this is encoded that the color that you can find is green, not yellow, because this is normal. So norms are encoded and things there. So data is biased. Labeling is biased if it's done especially also by people with different backgrounds and so on. Models are biased. And then the other problem is as well, if you're using a system and the user interface is created in a way that suggests something very strongly, it can create a feedback loop that makes it even worse. So that's the bad side. Because if you run with data, anything bad in data gets amplified. So this is a typical failure model for companies that have a very bad process. They say, oh my God, our hiring process is just hiring men, but let's use AI to fix it. Yeah. So guess what? It makes the problem way worse, right? So AI is a force multiplier because this is what you put in. But the good news is we have now the tools. So we have now the tools to synthetically generate data of underrepresented cases that we didn't have before. So there's no excuse that we don't have data for our case. We have tools to look into the stability of networks, so we can even debug the network, not just the data, to find out where there are problems. If everyone is using that yet, I would say there's still a lot to catch up, but people realize that building a good AI system is more engineering than just a black box. That, I think, changed. But if you use the tools, you very well will quickly discover where do you have the weaknesses.
Do you guys want to add anything? Anyone else want to? No?
Open AI, open source software, it's very important. You need to know the footnotes that went into the book that has been written. If you close off the footnotes, then you will never know the bias.
That's a great metaphor. I like that. Well done. There's a question right up here. Is there anyone who else has a question in the room? Just one.
Hi, sorry, I think I took your place. My name is Christopher Taylor. I'm a PM in predictive predictive behavior analysis and emotional AI. So this is actually a question that was brought on by Alex's comment, but it is a question for everyone on the panel. You said that AI will give us superpowers. But this has been the promise of technology for forever, as long as I can remember, and the world isn't in a really great place right now. Like, I don't feel that people are particularly happy. So why is the future of AI different?
Huh. I like this question, actually, a lot. I think it's a really good question. Oh, the promise. There's always a technology promise and the promise of positive change.
Maybe I can put
think
it.
this is.
Think. Let's just
Sorry.
go ahead, and then.
Oh, yeah.
I think really that this is what we have to take out. To me, this is really PR. I don't think that AI is going to make the world a better place. Humans are going to make a world a better place. It's a tool, you know, and it depends on what we do with that tool. It's not, AI is 100% not a promise. It's just a great tool to basically seep through huge data sets and to do tedious work. It's, I think demystification is very important, but it's a great tool. But it's a tool.
Yeah, what do you think?
I agree with you on that. I think there's something that you can say, as you said, the promise of technology is something that engraved in human history from technology starts. And it will be from the first technological tools we use to work on the land to create agriculture. And agriculture is something that people will say the beginning of the problem for our planet today. On the other hand, starvation. And so I think it's always the question, as Adina said here, it's a tool, and it's always reflect on us and us as a society, and are we willing to do something better with that? I do think, though, that yes, AI gave the centralization of data into the position that we are in a dangerous place right now, because how exponential the technology makes power, I think, distribution in the wrong way. But again, it's on us. It's not on the technology at all.
It's a great question. We're going to take one more question right here. No, right here.
In the front was.
He's been right here.
We'll
He's been
try.
very patient up here. It's going to be our last question before I come back to the panel for a question, the wrap up. And then we're going to go downstairs, have a glass of water.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to question the loss of creativity that comes from these tools, because you mentioned earlier that you now have the possibility to just write any text and get an image out of it. And I think you referred to DALL-E from OpenAI, and there's GPT-3 that generating text from creativity from text in the past. And there's even the music industry who's warning for music from AI. So LIAT mentioned in the beginning that the process of doing the brush stroke is like the creative way that cannot be reproduced by AI. So is there the possibility to lose this creative way when all of humanity starts to use the tools that will take the creative from humanity? Yeah.
So what was the question exactly? Sorry.
Losing creativity.
Okay.
Well, I feel that I already said something towards that with the containers, you know, like if you basically create those containers, plug and play containers that allow people to use them for their creativity, you limit creativity. And that's where I always go back to, just give people the tools and allow them to create and create a new licensing system.
I want to as well add to this, because this is actually what brought me to become this new constellation of artistic research in that understanding, and to move hands-on on the technology. I'm coming from painting, and in the Art Academy, you're never being taught about how to paint. And when I started working with robotics, of course, the painting department at the Art Academy of Leipzig just threw me out of the department, said, go into the media art, this is not painting anymore. Instead of like trying to understand that this is a reaction in order to say, I want to have my hands on the technology so I can design it for my creative needs, because I didn't like the fact that, as Alex here said, that we're using imagery today more than ever for communication. On top of it, there is a global market, and every art student feels in order to be up in the painting department, let's say, and to know I need to be up in what's going on in the world, to be up to date and create the best things, I need to consume as much as I can from this imagery. How do I consume this? through my phones. Most art students are really poor, so they have usually shitty phones, and they have really shitty representation of imagery that they try to somehow then represent or be influenced in a process that it's painting that has nothing to do with those images that they see in a flat screen. So there's a level of sensitivity and sensibility that is being removed from this entire process. And my wish was to make this tactility back as an element that help us to understand the world, to experience the world, and to create work that have this knowledge in it without excluding technology, as the altmodish painter would say, oh no, bad, evil computers. And so I'm really agreeing with Adina here. It's about getting the tools and to master it, and to, as well, even if I'm a terrible coder, I learn how to code just so I can understand the systems, but I'm really bad at that. It still gives me the intellectual as well ability to know how the system works, how it is, and this goes as well to the discussion about the biases, it's about ethics, it's about distribution of power. When you know, then you can be creative and you can do things with that to wherever you take it. That's my take on it.
I think that's actually a very good place to end this part of the program. It has been a real joy to speak with the three of you and to have you here with us today. You know, we talked about the promise of technology, and it's really just come up with the question here, what does a promise mean? What do we expect? What do we hope for? What do we wish for? What do we anticipate? What could we do with it? And I really liked the way all three of you were talking so much about us taking that in our hands as actors and trying to be active citizens, active participants, active learners, and to make sure that we're also as aware as we can be of the decisions which are being made and helping to influence those. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming over, for coming up, and for all of you for coming here this evening. Let's give them a great round of applause before we finish. Really great. So tomorrow, we will be hosting another Rethinking Living conversation, same place, different time. At 17:30, 5:30 tomorrow evening, we'll be talking Rethinking Cities. And I hope that many of you will consider coming us not just on a Friday night, but on a Saturday night. So thank you for being here, and thank you for enjoying the Berlin Science Week. All right, everybody. There we go.